In the autumn of 1929, America was the richest country that had ever existed. By the spring of 1930, men in three-piece suits were selling apples on the street for a nickel and feeling lucky to do it. The stock market didn't just crash, it evaporated. $14 billion gone in a single day. Adjusted for today, that's roughly $260 billion. Vanished before lunch. But here's what nobody tells you. The crash itself? That wasn't the disaster. The disaster was everything that came after, and almost all of it was preventable. This is the story of how a nation partied itself into oblivion and then starved in the hangover for 10 straight years. Let's rewind. It's 1927. America is drunk. Not on alcohol. Well, also on alcohol. Prohibition wasn't exactly working, but drunk on money. The economy had been booming for nearly a decade. Factories couldn't build things fast enough. Consumer credit had just been invented, basically, and Americans discovered they could buy now and pay later. Refrigerators, cars, radios, everyone was financing everything. It was like the entire country discovered Klarna at the same time. And then there was the stock market. Between 1925 and 1929, the Dow Jones nearly quadrupled. Regular people, teachers, plumbers, barbers were quitting their jobs to trade stocks full time. And why wouldn't they? The market only went up. It always went up. I made more money last month in RCA stock than I made all year cutting hair. So who's managing your portfolio? Managing? I just buy whatever the guy at the diner tells me. Here's the thing that made it all so fragile. Most of these people weren't buying stocks with their own money. They were buying on margin, essentially borrowing up to 90% of the purchase price from their broker. Put down $10, buy $100 of stock. If the stock goes up 10%, you've doubled your money. Incredible, right? But if it goes down 10%, you've lost everything. And you still owe the broker. Imagine downloading a gambling app, except the app lets you bet with 10 times leverage, and your house is the collateral. That's what margin trading was in the 1920s. No regulations, no safety net, no adult supervision. And for a while, it worked, until it very suddenly didn't. The cracks started showing months before the crash. In September 1929, the market hiccuped. Small dips, nothing dramatic, but a handful of economists, the kind nobody listens to at parties, started raising alarms. The market is dangerously overvalued. We're in a speculative bubble. You've been saying that for 2 years, Roger. Meanwhile, my clients are buying yachts. By early October, the sell-offs got a little bigger, a little more frequent. Smart money, the Rockefellers, the Morgans, the insiders, started quietly pulling out. But the average investor, they were still buying. Newspapers were still cheerful. The President of the United States himself said the economy was on a sound and prosperous basis. Then came October 24th, 1929, Black Thursday. The market opened and immediately plunged. Panic selling erupted. The ticker tape, the only way most people could track prices, fell so far behind that investors had no idea what their stocks were actually worth. Imagine your brokerage app freezing during a crash, except it lasts hours and your entire life savings are in there. That was Black Thursday. By noon, a group of powerful bankers met at the JP Morgan headquarters across from the stock exchange. They pooled their money and started buying stocks aggressively, trying to prop up the market through sheer force of will. Gentlemen, we will restore confidence. And honestly, it kind of worked, temporarily. The market stabilized that afternoon. Newspapers declared the crisis over. People exhaled. But that relief lasted exactly 5 days. October 28th, Black Monday. The Dow dropped 13% in a single session. No banker bailout this time, no reassuring headlines, just pure, unfiltered terror. And then, October 29th, Black Tuesday, the day the American dream had a heart attack. 16 million shares traded, a record that would stand for nearly 40 years. The Dow lost another 12%. Brokers were issuing margin calls left and right, demanding investors put up more cash to cover their borrowed positions. But nobody had more cash, so the brokers sold their stocks automatically at whatever price they could get, which drove prices down further, which triggered more margin calls, which caused more selling. It was a death spiral, a financial feedback loop with no off switch. Sir, your account is short by $4,000. We need payment by end of day or we liquidate your entire position. 4,000? I put in 6,000. How can I owe more than? Sir, the line behind you is very long. Do you have the money or not? By mid-November, the market had lost nearly half its value. Fortunes built over a decade were erased in weeks. But even then, people thought it was temporary, a correction, a bump in the road. They were catastrophically wrong. See, the crash didn't just hurt rich guys in top hats. It detonated the entire economy, like a chain of dominoes that nobody realized were even connected. Here's how. When the market crashed, all those margin investors were wiped out. They defaulted on their broker loans. The brokers had borrowed that money from banks. So now, the banks were taking massive losses. People heard the banks were in trouble and rushed to withdraw their savings. Classic bank run. But banks didn't keep all the cash on hand. They'd lent it out. So when everyone showed up demanding their money at once, the banks collapsed. Not a few banks. Over 9,000 banks failed between 1930 and 1933. 9,000. And there was no FDIC back then. No federal insurance on your deposits. If your bank went under, your savings were just gone. Like deleting a save file with no backup. Except the save file was your family's entire financial existence.
I put 20 years of savings in that bank.
What do we have left?
Whatever's in my coat pocket.
With banks gone and credit frozen, businesses couldn't get loans. Without loans, they couldn't operate. Factories closed. Workers were fired. Unemployed workers stopped buying things. Businesses lost more customers, more closures, more layoffs. The unemployment rate hit 25% by 1933. 1 in 4 Americans who wanted to work simply couldn't find a job. In some cities, it was closer to 50%. And this is where the story goes from financial disaster to human catastrophe. People were starving, not metaphorically, actually starving. In New York City, hospitals reported cases of children dying from malnutrition. In the rural Midwest, farmers were burning their own crops because they couldn't afford to transport them to market, while families in cities a few hundred miles away had nothing to eat. The system wasn't just broken, it was producing insane outcomes. Food rotting in fields, people starving in cities, both happening simultaneously because nobody had any money.
I've got 10 acres of wheat I can't sell. I've got 2 kids I can't feed.
And then the dust came. Years of aggressive farming had stripped the topsoil across the Great Plains. When drought hit in 1930, the earth turned to powder. Massive dust storms, some a mile high, buried farms, blotted out the sun, and sent millions of Okies fleeing west to California, where they were met not with open arms, but with hostility, exploitation, and more poverty. America, the land of infinite promise, had become a nation of breadlines and dust. But surely the government did something, right? Surely somebody stepped in? President Hoover believed the market would correct itself. He thought direct government aid would make people dependent and lazy. So for 3 agonizing years, the official policy was essentially wait it out.
Prosperity is just around the corner.
It was not around the corner. It wasn't even in the same zip code. In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt took office and immediately declared a bank holiday, shutting every bank in the country for 4 days to stop the bleeding. Then came the New Deal, a tsunami of government programs, public works, bank regulations, unemployment insurance, Social Security. The FDIC was created so that if your bank failed, your deposits were insured. The SEC was established to regulate the stock market so the margin trading free-for-all could never happen again. Did the New Deal end the Depression? Economists still argue about that like it's a Thanksgiving dinner debate. What's generally agreed is that it stopped the free fall and rebuilt the floor. But the full recovery? That didn't come until World War II, when military spending finally jolted the economy back to life. The Depression lasted roughly a decade. 10 years of suffering because of a speculative bubble, unchecked leverage, institutional overconfidence, and a government that reacted too slowly. Now, let's talk about why this matters to you, right now, today. In 2021, meme stocks and crypto sent retail investors into a frenzy that felt eerily familiar. People were leveraging money they didn't have to buy assets they didn't understand because the price only went up. Sound familiar? And when the Fed started raising rates and the music stopped, billions evaporated overnight. The instruments change. Margin accounts became options trading, became leveraged crypto futures. But the psychology is identical. Greed, FOMO, The unshakable belief that this time it's different. It's never different. Not really. The regulations built after 1929, the FDIC, the SEC, margin requirements, those exist because millions of people suffered. Every boring financial regulation you've ever heard of is a scar from a wound somebody else received. And every time someone argues to roll those regulations back because they're stifling innovation, they're essentially saying the scars have healed enough to try getting burned again. There's a photograph from 1936 by Dorothea Lange. A migrant mother, 32 years old, sitting in a tent in California with her children leaning against her. She looks like she's staring at something 1,000 miles away. That photo became the face of the Depression, not because of what it showed, but because of what it didn't show. The years of small decisions, reckless bets, and institutional arrogance that put her there. Nobody on Wall Street in 1928 thought they were building a machine that would starve children in 1932. But they were. One margin loan at a time. The scariest thing about 1929 isn't that it happened. It's that every ingredient that caused it, leverage, speculation, blind optimism, and a system that rewards risk until the exact moment it destroys you, every single one of those ingredients is still on the shelf. The only question is whether we've actually learned to read the recipe.